Return to sender. That's what the envelopes said. Every single one of them. 50 of them, to be exact, stacked in a shoebox at the back of my husband's closet, hidden behind his old sweaters like a secret he'd carried to his grave. I found them 3 weeks after Frank's funeral. I'd finally worked up the courage to clean out his things, not because I was ready, but because my sister-in-law Marge kept asking when I'd finish. She'd already taken his good watch. She'd already claimed his leather chair. She'd already started rearranging the kitchen like she was preparing for a garage sale. "Ellie, dear," she'd said on the phone that morning, "you really should let me come help. The clutter can't be good for you." Marge had been helping me for 47 years. She'd helped me plan my wedding. She'd helped me raise my children. She'd helped me manage Frank's declining health. And now she was helping me grieve, one passive-aggressive comment at a time. But she hadn't helped me find the shoebox. I pulled it out of the closet, expecting old photographs or tax records. Instead, I found envelopes addressed to me, all dated, all unopened, all bearing the same handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. The handwriting of a 17-year-old girl who'd given away her baby and promised to write him every year on his birthday. My handwriting. If you've ever discovered a secret that rewrote your entire understanding of your own life, stay with me, because what I found in that closet changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and myself. And if you enjoy stories about hidden truths, long-buried secrets, and unexpected second chances, subscribe to Broken Trust Stories. My name is Eleanor Brennan, and for 50 years, I believed my son hated me. I'd like to tell you I was young and foolish when I gave him up, but that's not quite true. I was young, certainly. 17, with braces still on my teeth and a boyfriend who'd stopped taking my calls the week he found out. But I wasn't foolish. I was desperate. It was 1974. I was living in a small town in Vermont, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. My mother was a church secretary. My father worked at the paper mill. We didn't have much money, but we had plenty of shame. When I started showing, my parents made their decision quickly and quietly. "You'll go to your aunt's house in New Hampshire," my mother said. "You'll have the baby there. You'll give it up for adoption. And you'll never speak of it again." I didn't argue. I couldn't. I'd already spent months hiding my pregnancy, wearing oversized sweaters, avoiding eye contact at school, praying that no one would notice what I'd become. When my parents finally confronted me, the only thing I felt was relief that the pretending was over. The adoption was arranged through a Catholic agency. I never saw the baby's face. They took him from me minutes after he was born, whisked him away before I could hold him, before I could say goodbye. A nurse told me he was healthy. A social worker told me he'd be going to a good family. A priest told me I was doing the right thing. I believed them. I had to believe them. Because the alternative, that I'd made the worst mistake of my life, was unbearable. I went home, graduated high school, and moved to Massachusetts for nursing school. I'd always wanted to help people, to hold their hands through the hardest moments, to be the steady presence in the room when everything else felt chaotic. I became a neonatal intensive care nurse because I wanted to give other people's babies the love I'd never been able to give my own. I met Frank at a hospital fundraiser in 1977. He was handsome in a solid, unpretentious way, with a kind smile and an easy laugh. He worked as a high school history teacher, coached baseball, and still called his mother every Sunday. His family was the kind I'd always wanted to belong to. Frank's mother, Ruth, was a warm, practical woman who never asked too many questions. His father, Harold, was quiet and gentle. And his older sister, Marge, was... well, Marge was Marge. She was 5 years older than Frank and had appointed herself the family's unofficial historian. She remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every embarrassing childhood moment. She planned every holiday, coordinated every reunion, and managed every family crisis with the efficiency of a military commander. When I met Marge, she looked me up and down like I was a stock she was considering purchasing. "Eleanor," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Frank tells me you're a nurse." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Practical work. And your family? What does your father do?" I'd rehearsed this answer. "He works at the paper mill in our hometown. My mother's a church secretary." Marge nodded approvingly. "Solid. Small town people. That's good. Frank needs someone grounded." I didn't tell her about the baby. I didn't tell anyone. I'd buried that secret so deep inside myself that I'd almost convinced myself it wasn't real. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my arms aching with the phantom weight of a child I'd never held, and I'd have to remind myself that it was just a dream. Except it wasn't a dream. It was a life I'd given away. On my son's first birthday, I wrote him a letter. I don't remember exactly what I wrote. Something about how I was thinking of him, how I hoped he was happy and loved, how I would always carry him in my heart. I sent it to the adoption agency, asking them to forward it to his parents. I never heard back. I told myself it was fine. Maybe the adoption agency didn't forward letters. Maybe his parents didn't want him to know about me. Maybe the letter got lost in the mail. There were 1,000 explanations, and I clung to every one of them. On his second birthday, I wrote another letter. On his third, another. Every year, without fail, I wrote to the son I'd never known. I'd buy a card or fold a piece of stationery, write from the heart, address it to the adoption agency, and drop it in the mailbox. Sometimes I'd cry. Sometimes I'd feel a strange sense of peace, like I was sending a prayer into the universe. I never got a response. By the time I married Frank, I'd written 10 letters. I'd stopped expecting answers. The silence had become part of my routine, as familiar as the ache in my chest. Frank never knew about the letters. He never knew about the baby. I told myself it wasn't lying, it was simply protecting him from a painful part of my past. He didn't need to know about the girl I'd been before I met him. He loved the woman I'd become, and that was enough. Or so I believed. We had children of our own. A daughter, Emily, and a son, Thomas. I loved them fiercely, with a desperate intensity that sometimes surprised me. I held them too tightly, watched them too closely, worried about them too much. I was terrified of losing them, even as I tried to give them the freedom I'd never had. Frank was a good father. Patient, present, proud. He coached Thomas's little league team, taught Emily to drive, took us on camping trips every summer. Our life was ordinary and beautiful, the kind of life I'd always dreamed of. Marge was always there, hovering at the edges. She'd criticize my cooking, comment on my weight, offer unsolicited parenting advice. But she'd also babysit when I was sick, bring casseroles when I was tired, and organize birthday parties when I forgot to order the cake. She was impossible and essential, infuriating and indispensable. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew everyone. I was wrong. The first letter I pulled from the shoebox was dated 1975. "Dear David," it began. I'd named him David, after my grandfather. It was the only thing I could give him, a name he'd probably never use. I read the letter with trembling hands, transported back to that tiny apartment in New Hampshire, barely 18 years old, holding a pen and crying over a piece of stationery. I could remember the weight of the pen, the smell of the paper, the sound of the rain against the window pane. The letter was short, simple, full of promises I couldn't keep. I hope you're having a wonderful birthday. I hope you're loved. I hope you're happy. I think about you every day. I will always think about you. If you ever want to meet me, if you ever want to know who I am, I will be here. I will always be here. I set the letter down and picked up the next one. 1976, Dear David, I'm sure you're walking by now. I imagine you laughing, running, discovering the world. I wonder what you look like. Do you have my eyes? My smile? I wonder if you know how much you were wanted. Dear David, I'm getting married soon. His name is Frank. He's kind and good and he makes me laugh. I wish you could meet him. I wish you could meet all of us. I think you'd like our family. Dear David, I had a daughter today. Her name is Emily. I held her in my arms and I thought of you. I wonder if anyone held you the way I'm holding her. I hope they did. I hope you know how much love your birth mother had for you. Letter after letter, year after year. I'd poured my soul into these pages, my grief, my longing, my hope. And someone had kept every single one of them. Not the adoption agency. Not David's parents. Someone else. I knew before I turned to the last letter. I knew whose handwriting was on the return address, whose careful script had written return to sender on every single envelope. Frank's. No. That wasn't right. Frank was a history teacher who could barely write a legible grocery list. His handwriting was a scrawl, all jagged letters and smudged ink. The writing on these envelopes was precise, elegant, practiced. I knew that handwriting too. I'd seen it on 1,000 family newsletters, 100 birthday cards, a dozen sympathy notes. Marge. My sister-in-law had been intercepting my letters for 45 years. I sat on the floor of Frank's closet, surrounded by 50 years of unanswered correspondence, and I felt the world tilt sideways. The ceiling seemed to spin. The walls seemed to close in. I couldn't breathe. Marge. The woman who'd helped me plan my wedding. The woman who'd held my hand when Emily was born. The woman who'd brought me soup when I had the flu and sat with me through Frank's cancer treatments and organized his funeral with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. She'd been stealing my letters. She'd been marking them return to sender and hiding them in Frank's closet for decades. I thought about all those years of silence. All those years of believing my son didn't want me. All those years of carrying the shame of his rejection, the weight of his indifference. I'd convinced myself I deserved the silence, that I'd been punished for my sins, that this was God's justice for the choices I'd made. And all along, it had been Marge. My hands were shaking as I gathered the letters back into the shoebox. I was still in my bathrobe, my hair uncombed, my face streaked with tears. I looked like a madwoman. I felt like one. I walked to the kitchen, clutching the box to my chest. The phone was on the counter. I could call Marge. I could scream at her, demand answers, force her to explain how she could do something so cruel. But I didn't call her. I was too numb, too shattered, too utterly broken to form words. Instead, I did what I'd done for the past 50 years. I sat in my chair, stared at the wall, and let the silence swallow me whole. It took me 3 days to call Emily. She was the only one I could trust with this, the only one who might understand. Thomas was too much like his father, too quick to forgive, too eager to smooth things over. But Emily had inherited my stubbornness, my determination to know the truth even when it hurt. Mom? Her voice was sleepy when she answered the phone. It's 7 a.m. I know. I tried to sound calm. I need to tell you something. Can you come over? Is everything okay? No. But I'm not in danger. I just need you here. She arrived within the hour, still in her pajamas, her hair wet from the shower. She'd driven through 2 towns without stopping for breakfast, without even stopping for coffee. Mom. She dropped her bag by the door and wrapped her arms around me. What happened? You look terrible. I found something. I led her to the kitchen table, where the shoebox sat like a loaded weapon. In your father's closet. Emily sat down, her face pale with worry. I opened the box, pulled out the top letter, and handed it to her. Read it. She hesitated, then began to read. I watched her face cycle through confusion, surprise, and finally horror. Mom, this is your handwriting. Yes. This is about a baby? My son. Your half-brother. I gave him up for adoption when I was 17. I never told anyone. Not your father, not anyone. Emily's eyes were wide. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought he didn't want me. Because for 50 years, I believed that my son rejected me. I handed her another letter. And another. And another. She read them all, her face growing wider with each page. These were all returned, she said finally. Returned to sender. Except they weren't returned. They were intercepted. I showed her the envelopes, the familiar handwriting on the return address. Look at this. Does it look familiar? Emily stared at the writing. Her lips parted. That's Aunt Marge's handwriting. Yes. But, why? Why would she do this? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't know if it was about protecting me or protecting the family or just control. I don't know anything anymore. Emily sat back in her chair, her expression shifting from shock to anger. What about Dad? Did he know? The question I'd been avoiding for 3 days. I don't know, I said. The box was in his closet. He had to have known it was there. But whether he knew what was inside. I trailed off. I couldn't finish the sentence. Emily reached across the table and took my hand. We need to talk to Aunt Marge. No. My voice was sharper than I'd intended. Not yet. I need to know more before I confront her. I need to find David. David? The name I gave him. I don't even know if he still uses it. But I need to find him. I need to know if he ever got any of my letters. I need to know if he's alive, if he's happy, if he has a family. Emily nodded slowly. Okay. How do we do that? I don't know. But I've been a nurse for 40 years. I've tracked down people before. I can find my own son. It took me 3 months. 3 months of phone calls and online searches and conversations with adoption agencies. 3 months of hitting dead ends and starting over. 3 months of lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was too late. But eventually, I found him. His name wasn't David. It was James. James Whitfield. He'd been adopted by a family in Connecticut and grown up in a comfortable, stable home. He'd gone to medical school, become a cardiologist, married a woman named Rebecca, and had 2 children of his own. And he was living only 2 hours away from me. I stared at the screen of my laptop, unable to process what I was seeing. James Whitfield, MD, Chief of Cardiology at a hospital in New Hampshire. The hospital was just over the state line, less than 100 miles from my house. For 20 years, my son had been living practically in my backyard. And I hadn't known. I also discovered something else. A file. Hidden in the shoebox beneath the letters. A manila folder labeled simply James Whitfield. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Photographs. School records. News clippings. Medical reports. Frank had been tracking him for years, gathering information like a detective building a case. Frank had known. He'd known about my son, known about the intercepted letters, known exactly where David, James, was. And he'd kept it all from me. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The man I'd loved for 40 years had lied to me. Not out of malice, maybe, but still. He'd lied. I called Emily. I found him. Found who? My son. He's a doctor. He lives in New Hampshire. He's only 2 hours away. Emily was quiet for a moment. Mom, that's incredible. But, how do you know it's really him? I have proof. I told her about the file. Your father had been tracking him for years. He knew everything. He knew where David was, and he never told me. Maybe he was waiting for the right time. Emily, your father died. He never told me. He took the secret to his grave. Silence. Then, what are you going to do? I looked at the photograph in my hand. It was James at his medical school graduation, young and proud, wearing a cap and gown. He had my smile. He had my eyes. I'm going to meet him, I said. If he wants to meet me. But I'm not going to force myself into his life. I just need to know if he ever got my letters. I need to know if he ever knew I existed. And if he didn't? I thought about that for a long time. Then I need to tell him the truth. And I need to figure out how to forgive the people who lied to me. I met James at a coffee shop near his hospital. I'd spent an hour choosing my outfit, debating whether to wear something formal or casual, whether to look like a grandmother or a stranger. In the end, I settled on a simple blue dress and my grandmother's necklace. I wanted him to see me as I was, not as someone pretending. He arrived exactly on time. Tall, broad-shouldered, with graying temples and kind eyes. He looked so much like his father that my breath caught in my throat. Eleanor? His voice was uncertain. James. I stood up, my hands trembling. Thank you for coming. He sat across from me, studying my face. I have to be honest, he said. When I got your letter, I didn't know what to think. I've known I was adopted my whole life, but I never expected this. Neither did I said. I sent letters to the adoption agency for 50 years. I never heard back. I thought you didn't want to know me. James frowned. I never received any letters. My parents told me that the adoption was closed. They said my birth mother had chosen to remain anonymous. I felt the tears coming. That's not true. I wrote to you every year. Every birthday. I never stopped. I believe you. He leaned forward. But something must have gone wrong. Someone must have intercepted them. I know who did it. I told him everything. The letters, the shoebox, Marge, Frank's file. James listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. Your sister-in-law did this? He asked. For 50 years? She was trying to protect me. Or protect herself. I don't know. I wiped my eyes. But the point is, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting to know you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that someone kept us apart. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. You're my mother, he said. Not the woman who raised me, she'll always be my mother. But you're the woman who gave me life. And I've spent my whole life wondering about you, wondering if you were alive, wondering if you ever thought about me. I never stopped thinking about you, I said. Not for a single day. He smiled, and it was like looking into a mirror. I have children, he said. A daughter and a son. They're teenagers now. They've always asked about their birth grandmother. I never had an answer. You have an answer now. Yeah. He squeezed my hand. I guess I do. We talked for hours. About his childhood, his family, his career. About my marriage, my children, my life. He showed me photographs of his children, and I showed him photographs of Emily and Thomas. I never knew I had a half-sister and half-brother, he said. That's incredible. I have siblings. You do. I smiled through my tears. And they're going to be thrilled to meet you. We parted with a promise to stay in touch. He hugged me tightly, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been locked away for 50 years finally opening. After he left, I sat in my car and cried. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Marge's annual family dinner was 2 weeks later. I dreaded it every year, the forced pleasantries and passive-aggressive comments, the way she'd critique my cooking and remind me of my failings. But this year, I was almost looking forward to it. Emily and Thomas were both coming. And I'd invited James. When I arrived at Marge's house, she was already in full hostess mode, bustling around the kitchen, directing the caterers, arranging the flowers. She barely glanced up when I walked in. "Eleanor, you're early. The turkey won't be ready for another hour." "I know. I wanted to talk to you before everyone else arrives." Marge paused, her hands hovering over a platter of vegetables. "Is something wrong?" "I found the letters." My voice was steady, calmer than I'd expected. "In Frank's closet. 50 of them. All marked return to sender. All intercepted by you." Marge's face went white. She set down the platter, her hands trembling. "Eleanor, I can explain." "Please do." I sat down at the kitchen table, folding my hands in front of me. I've had 50 years to wonder why my son never wrote back. I'd like to know why his aunt decided to steal his letters. Marge sank into the chair across from me. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" "From the scandal. From the shame. From having to face the mistakes of your past." Her voice was sharp, defensive. "You were young and foolish, Eleanor. You made a terrible decision. And then you spent your whole life trying to pretend it never happened. I was helping you move on. You were lying to me. I was saving you. If you'd met that boy, if you'd let him into your life, everything would have fallen apart. Your marriage. Your children. Your reputation. Frank's reputation. The whole family would have been destroyed. My family is not your concern." "Of course it is." Marge was crying now, ugly sobs that racked her body. "I've spent my whole life taking care of this family. I've done everything for you. I planned your wedding, I raised your children, I nursed your husband through his cancer. I gave up my whole life for this family, and you have no idea how much I sacrificed." "I didn't ask you to sacrifice anything. You didn't have to. It was my job. It was my duty. And now you're going to destroy everything I built because you couldn't let go of the past?" I stared at her for a long moment. This was Marge's truth, the twisted logic that had justified decades of betrayal. She'd convinced herself she was the victim, the martyr, the hero of a story no one else was telling. "Did Frank know?" I asked. Marge's sobs quieted. She wiped her eyes, her face suddenly guarded. "He knew there were letters. He didn't know what was in them. But he knew about James." "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He found out years ago, when he was tracking the adoption records. He knew James was a doctor in New Hampshire. He wanted to tell you, but I convinced him it was better this way." "You convinced him to lie to me." "I convinced him to protect you." The front door opened. I heard Emily's voice in the foyer, then Thomas's, then James's. Marge's head snapped up. "Who's that?" "My son," I said. "David. James. The boy you kept from me for 50 years. The door to the kitchen opened, and James walked in. He looked at Marge, and his expression was unreadable. "Hello, Aunt Marge," he said. "I've heard a lot about you." Marge stared at him, her face ashen. You're him." "I'm him." He walked to the table, pulling out a chair. "I've also heard about the letters. The ones you threw away. The ones you sent back without telling my mother." "It wasn't like that," Marge said weakly. "I was trying to protect her." "From what?" "From knowing that her son loved her? From knowing that he was alive and happy and successful?" James's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "My birth mother wrote to me for 50 years. 50 years of wondering if I was loved, if I was wanted, if I'd ever known her. And you took that away from both of us. Marge broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Emily and Thomas had entered the kitchen, and they stood in the doorway, watching. I looked at my children. At my son. At the sister-in-law who'd stolen my family's history. I'm not pressing charges, I said. I'm not going to destroy you, Marge. But I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the secrets. And I'm done with you. What are you saying? From now on, my family is my family. And you're not part of it. Marge's sobs turned to wails, but I didn't stay to comfort her. I took my children's hands, both of them, the ones I'd raised and the one I'd lost, and I walked out of the kitchen. The Thanksgiving turkey sat on the counter, uneaten. The flowers wilted in their vases. The perfectly arranged table stayed empty. I didn't care. I had my son back. That was 5 years ago. James and I talk every week. He's brought his children to visit me, and they call me Grandma Ellie. Emily and Thomas have welcomed him into the family with open arms. We spend holidays together now, all of us, in my little house by the sea. Marge moved to Florida. She sends Christmas cards, which I don't open. She calls sometimes, and I let it go to voicemail. I don't hate her. I just don't want her in my life. Frank's memory is complicated now. I loved him, and I always will. But I can't forget that he lied to me, that he let his sister control my life, that he chose her version of the truth over mine. I've forgiven him. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to. I couldn't carry that weight anymore. As for James, he's thriving. His children are in college now. He's still a cardiologist, still saving lives, still the kind of person I always hoped he'd become. We're making up for lost time, one conversation at a time. My life isn't perfect. The scars are still there, the old wounds, the memories of loss. But I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm not hiding. I'm Eleanor Brennan, mother of 3, grandmother of 5, retired NICU nurse, and survivor of secrets that should have stayed buried. And for the first time in 50 years, I know that my story is still being written. Would you have confronted your sister-in-law immediately, or would you have waited to find your child first? Tell me in the comments what you would have done, and why. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to find the truth. And if you want more stories about family secrets, buried pasts, and unexpected second chances, subscribe to Broken Trust Stories. We'll be here, telling the stories that remind us that the past doesn't have to define our future.